weapon at one of them to send them running in the opposite direction and leaving you to feed on the other civilian without needing to worry about being blood hunted. But before we move on, let me explain that there is another way of breaking the masquerade, and that is by fully eliminating a civilian. And they only take one bullet to eliminate, so be careful with who you're aiming at, since they do run around quite realistically at times. Next up, we have tip number 9, in the eye of the public. If you use any of your vampiric abilities in front of civilians, they will scream at the sight of your supernatural powers. And the reason you don't want this to happen is because after using an ability in front of a civilian, a small pulse will surround your icon on the map. And this will be another indicator of where you are located. Now, this does only last for a few seconds, but it would still make it easier for real enemy players to see you and hit you with a surprise attack. So be wary of using your abilities in front of civilians around Prague. Before we move on though, I want you to know that this pulse that indicates where you are located will also happen if you use any weapons, including melee weapons, around civilians. Moving on to tip number 8, we have check out the whip. In BloodHunt, there are 3 different types of vans scattered around the map that will have various different loot in them. Police vans will have ammo and armor plates, but sometimes only ammo. Orange vans will have weapons ranging from uncommon, rare, and epic weapons, and sometimes even melee weapons in them. And lastly, yellow ambulances that will have blood bags and blood syringes in them. So if you're needing a different weapon, ammo, and or armor, and some bloody heals, see what I did there? Be sure to look out for these vans around Prague. Moving on to tip number 7, sirens. While you are running around Prague, you will most likely hear sirens and alarms going off because an enemy player just broke into a store around the map. If you listen closely, you can pinpoint where this enemy is and get a perfect sneak attack on them while they are looting the store. This actually makes a perfect segue into tip number 6, knowing the stores of Prague. In BloodHunt, there are 3 different kinds of stores scattered about. There are blood banks that hold multiple blood bags and blood syringes behind paintings on the walls of the store. There are gun stores that will have uncommon, rare, and sometimes even epic loot behind the cabinet doors of those stores, and even armor plates from time to time. And lastly, melee antique stores. These shops will have multiple cases you can crack open that can have gas neutralizers, spiked bats, fire axes, katanas, and even scourge blades in them. Now, once again, this is a fantastic segue into my next tip, number 5. Neutralizing. You can pick these little containers up around the map in loot piles, and as I stated previously, you can also get them in melee antique stores around the map from time to time. These gas neutralizers will completely nullify the effects of the red gas that is closing in on the map for a few seconds. So if you need to heal up but can't get away from enemies, you can pop a gas neutralizer if you have one and jump into the red gas to heal up. Not many vampires are bold enough to chase you into the red gas, so this will make a perfect opportunity to heal up and jump back into the fight. Using the red gas neutralizer is especially helpful mid to late game when the red gas hurts badly each time it hits you. Moving on to tip number 4. Heightened senses. This skill allows you to see audio pings in the direction of where bullets are being fired off. And referring back to tip number 7 of hearing sirens, this skill will allow you to see the direction of where the store was broken into with a visible audio ping on your screen. This skill also allows you to see enemy players highlighted in red while it's active if they are within a close enough vicinity. It allows you to see loot piles through walls, and it allows you to see resonant blood civilians through walls. The Heightened Senses skill is bound to the X key on keyboard by default. Moving on to tip number 3, resonant blood. First off, let me explain that you are able to get 12 resonance buffs in a single game of BloodHunt, but you only spawn in with 3 slots open. In order to open up the remaining 9 slots, you must perform a Diablo Rise on 9 individual players. You can Diablo Rise an enemy player after you have fully depleted their health to 0 and they are in their down Resonance will increase your melee damage by 10% if you have one of them, 25% if you have two of them, and 50% if you have three of them. As for the third resonance, Phlegmatic, which comes from civilians highlighted in cyan, this resonance will decrease the cooldown of your offensive and or defensive abilities, like the bombs a saboteur places, or the flash ability of the siren. These abilities will also get a 10% decrease in cooldown if you have one of them, 20%
They should have added werewolf to this.
50% if you have three of them. Now on to the final resonance, Sigmund, which comes from civilians highlighted in pink. This resonance will give you passive health regeneration by 1 HP per second if you have one of them.
But they gotta make the wolves like Underworld.
If you have three of them. Now that we understand how resonances work in BloodHunt, let's move on to tip number 2. The Entity. The Entity are NPC government soldiers deep-rooted in the lore of BloodHunt that have it out for you and every other vampire alive. Their goal is to extinguish all vampires, and they are quite good at it. There are multiple spawn locations on the map for the Entity, and each location can have 2 or more soldiers on duty. If you're thinking that really isn't a challenge, think again, because not only do the Entity come equipped with incredibly strong burst rifles, but they also have legal aimbot. I mean it when I say they do not miss. So if you find yourself close to an Entity spawn location, run in the opposite direction, unless you are very well geared up and in the mood for a challenge. If you are in fact in the mood for a challenge and end up eliminating all the Entity soldiers, you'll be